What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Devy Dose. I'm your host, EK at EK Baller. And today I have a very special guest to come on and talk some early free agency, talk some process, talk some tight ends. One of the guys that's one of the best in general, but especially with this position. Say hello to David Gautieri.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it, especially the tight end talk, the free agency talk. I think we'll cover a few tidbits, but I think that the tight ends is more what we want to talk about.
Yeah, it's the meat of it. I don't want to ignore the current events, but this is definitely a prospect show this time of year. So what do you got to plug right now, David? What are you working on? Where do you want the eyeballs to go, and where do you want people to find you?
Yeah, for number one, you can just follow me on Twitter if you want to just follow me there, as you can see at Guru Fantasy World. If you want access to more of the behind the scenes content, exclusive stuff, you can join the Patreon as well. You'll get access to my rankings. You'll get access to the tight end checklist. You'll get a monthly letter in the off season. You'll get a weekly letter in the in season. We have a Discord tier as well if you want to join the Discord. Other analysts in there. We have Akash, Nelly. You can ask them questions as well. So all of that's available on the Patreon. We have a few different tiers, but it's generally pretty low cost of entry. So try not to really restrict anyone from that.
That's awesome. So if you guys are out here, you're not already following David, make sure you at least give him the follow on Twitter. But I'll say personally, I play with David in leagues, and we've known each other for a long time. His evaluation, his prowess, and that is worth the follow and worth the couple of bucks that he wants to join the Patreon. So do that, and if you're not already subscribed to the Devy Dose, please follow us on the channel. We need your support. Tons of prospect videos, rookie profiles, and of course, unique content like this with awesome guests every week. So I guess first things first. What were your big takeaways from the first wave of free agency? Was there anything that was really earth shaking for you in terms of fantasy football? Was it a little Who are you interested in? What changed for you? Take the reins.
I would say the big news dropper is obviously probably going to be Rodgers to the Jets, and Garrett Wilson is kind of becoming a little bit of a hot topic right now. He's someone who I love personally. I was trading 101 for Garrett Wilson plus before the Rodgers news dropped. I traded 101 for Garrett Wilson 204. I got kind of roasted over the coals a little bit on Twitter there. So people think I left a little bit of meat on the bone, which is fair enough. It's 101. You can only sell that pick once. So I can understand. But if I could get more than Garrett Wilson plus 204, especially a rebuilding team, probably moving that. On the other hand, I do see the other side of the fence, like Zoltan, for one, is really out there, just leading the charge. Garrett Wilson's a sell, which I will say that one of the trades he's posted, he got Amon-Ra St. Brown and 106 for Garrett Wilson and 111.
Yeah,
I would take the Amon-Ra side on that.
Yeah, me as well. I don't think I prefer Wilson, but I don't prefer him by 106. We're in a startup right now, and actually, full disclosure, I took Wilson ahead of some guys that in a vacuum I would probably rank ahead of him. Like he went one spot ahead of AJ Brown and maybe four
I
or
have him
five.
ahead of AJ Brown. I agree with that.
Yeah, I thought it through. Partly it was just I'm in a lot of leagues. I know you are. I do some kind of portfolio stuff, right? So if I really am low on guys and I like them and they're in the same tier, I will take them ahead of a guy that maybe I would have one spot higher, just to try to get some shares spread out. But also, there's an easy path for him just getting a whole bunch more targets than AJ Brown, and I don't think you necessarily need to project him for a lower efficiency. I mean, that offense could be really, really good with Rodgers. So I think there's a lot to like there, and I think there's a path forward where we're talking about him not in the tier of Chase and Jefferson, but like being the guy right behind that this time next year.
And I think just from like an valuation standpoint, you got to look at market sentiments and just do like I think he's a little bit safer than AJ Brown in the next 2-3 years in terms of holding that valuation, just because AJ Brown's had some injuries in his career. His age is going to start getting up there around 26, 27 in the next couple of years. So people are going to start to ding him for that a little bit. If he has another injury, like let's say they both have the same injury next year, who's going to be held against worse? A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson. Like it's going to be held against A.J. Brown a lot more. Not to say A.J. Brown's value is not insulated, because it very much is. But it's a super tight tier at that point. So, I mean, if you can, I think it's take your pick between those. If you can pivot from one to the other, you can get a plus on top. I think you're definitely doing that, especially we talked about if you can get into the top 6 picks, pivoting off Garrett Wilson to another, top 8 wide receiver. Very interested in that.
Yeah, all about making the quarters where we can, right? And then adding them up and selling them for dollars. I'm totally with you. I think there were some kind of interesting running back moves, right? Like David Montgomery to the Lions, I think is probably fantasy football relevant. Honestly, it's probably a better situation for him than the Bears, I think. What's your take on that? Did that do anything for you?
I would say it's definitely a plus for David Montgomery. Just won the contract. They gave him enough money and enough years where it signals an intent to use him. They had a running back in that role last year, Jamal Williams, who was over 1,000 yards rushing, had led the league in rushing touchdowns, I believe, 17 rushing touchdowns. A lot of those from the 1 yard line. He's probably not going to get that lucky this year in that same role. But we saw this last year, a team wanting to use a powerful running back in a short yardage, especially near the goal line role. So I think that's good for Montgomery, especially they haven't loved using Swift in a rushing volume. So there's really no threat to rushing volume for David Montgomery. Swift, I feel like people are going to kind of overreact. I've been higher than consensus. I feel like I've just been on the way down. Like every time I'm saying, keep buying him. And he keeps falling. And I'm like, fuck.
Yeah.
But I'm going to keep buying him.
The
price is still falling. And I just see a guy with, especially Montgomery, what happens if he suffers an injury? I still believe Swift has legitimate top 5 upside. It would even just barely enough rushing work. The receiving ceiling is just so high. This guy falls out of bed. He's a 50 reception running back. So I like DeAndre Swift. I'm not going to give up on him because they went from Jamal Williams to David Montgomery.
Yeah, I have a trade in an inbox in a league right now that's been sitting there for weeks, and I intellectually know I should take it, but intuitively, emotionally, I'm just looking at it. I'm like, I really want more Swift than I have right now, and it's the 201 and the 204 for Swift. I would get Swift. I should totally smash it.
You're overpaying. I don't agree. You should smash it.
Really? Yeah.
I think DeAndre Swift's market right now is right about at that 201. We're talking about who are you picking at that point. You're getting, we'll say Charbonnet's off the board. Obviously, the top 3 running backs are gone. It's going to be Bijan's gone. Gibbs is gone. Charbonnet, we'll say he's gone. But there are some good profiles, and one of them is going to get the draft capital and a landing spot, and it's probably going to be there at 201, whether it's Zach Evans, whether it's Kendrick Miller. And these guys are going to carry hype. The second that happens in the draft capital land, one of them is going to get it. Devin A-Chain. There are some good running backs there in that second tier. You could keep going. You got to keep naming names.
And they don't have NFL injury history yet.
Yeah, they don't have any negative sentiments. And at that point, you're going to be able to sell 201 for Swift plus maybe. That's probably what we're talking about. So I don't.
Yeah, that's basically what's held me back. So I look at the players and I'm like, it's gonna be an Evans, it's gonna be a Tucker if Tucker gets DC, it's gonna be Zay Flowers if he falls out of the first round of rookie draft. Hell, Michael Mayer I think is gonna be at least like a TJ Hawkinson type player. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You might have a different take, but I think there's a lot of value that's gonna be hanging around there. I think what else is really germane. Any of the other wide receiver moves do anything for you? Any of the signings so far?
This wide receiver free agent class was terrible. It didn't move the needle at all. I think there's just a couple other running backs that I kind of like talk about Miles Sanders, who he also got.
Yeah, that's exciting.
He got a pretty good contract in Carolina. He's a good prospect. He's a 2nd round pick. He's got 175 plus touches or a pace of it when we're talking about his injured seasons every single year. So he's high pick. He's proven volume. Now he's got the contract. Well, look at last year. They were running the ball crazily heavily, like just running it nonstop. They have no wide receivers to speak of at this point. They're going to be
Yeah.
bringing in a rookie quarterback. So it's basically locked in. Miles Sanders is getting like 20 carries a game, I feel like.
Yeah.
Obviously
And I
not
think,
average, but
yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think he's a decent back, but I think it's pretty fair to say that Sanders is more talented than Foreman, and Foreman had success in that system last year as well. And Sanders has familiarity with the OC, right? I can't remember who it was, but I know there was a tie from earlier in their career. So very excited for him there. I still think, I don't know. I feel like they usually wind up with some kind of a committee, Carolina, but that might be more of a just like a feel thing than actual fact. I could be
yeah.
off base on that. What's your thoughts there?
I think if they will, it's going to be Miles Sanders leading it for sure. And I think
Yeah.
most running backs are committee running backs. We talk about like another guy, J.K. Dobbins, who I've got him pretty much back to back in my rankings with Miles Sanders. The market's got him a lot wider. I mean, we're talking about very, very similar type profiles, very similar type roles. Neither one of these guys has shown at any point in their career anything to be crazily confused with a workhorse, 3 down, 50 plus reception running back. I mean, so we're talking about two committee running backs here. And I think you can get a pretty significant plus. Like if you can get Sanders in a mid-second round pick, uh, maybe you can get, if you're lucky, if you want to do Dobbins in a 2025 2 for Sanders in a 2025 1, taking Sanders in the one all day. So I think you can
Yeah.
pivot off of like other assets in that range who are similarly risky, similar upside. Talk about Javonte Williams as well, who's got a lot of risk to him as well. Obviously, I
Yeah.
think a better player when
Maybe
healthy
even a
than
bigger name, like pivot down from Dalvin Cook straight up to a younger Sanders or get a little plus there, something along those lines. Once Cook lands somewhere and we know he's back with the Vikings or, has a contract on another team, would be an interesting idea for me.
I like that as well. And the other name you mentioned was Deontay Foreman. And I
Mhm.
think he's an intriguing guy in Chicago as well, who he had some success last year. Talk about leaders in 100-yard rushing games. Last year we had for running backs Derrick Henry with 9, Chubb with 7, Josh Jacobs with 6, and then we had 5 guys with 5. McCaffrey, Etienne, Kenneth Walker, Aaron Jones, and Deontay Foreman with 5. And Foreman didn't even start until week 8 post McCaffrey
Yeah.
trade. So he was
Yeah.
just putting up these big rushing games. And he was certainly taking the opportunity he was giving and maximizing it. So I think there's a role. Khalil Herbert has only ever been a committee running back. He's been efficient in his role,
Yeah.
but it's going to be beneficial playing alongside Justin Fields. So I think especially if Herbert were to get injured, Deontay Foreman has very high upside, especially talk about the cost. Relative to cost, I love the cost acquisition of Deontay Foreman right now.
Yeah, I have a billion shares from acquiring him on waivers at the beginning of last year when things started to take place for him there. The confusing thing about that situation to me is I mean, maybe not stylistically they're all the same, but they're both like 1 and 2 down bangers, big, powerful, physical backs, like both tackle shedders. Just feel like there's so much overlap between that role. It's definitely I feel like it winds up being like a one and a backup, right?
I
Like,
think to me, what it signals is that people need to cool their expectations with DJ Moore in Chicago because neither one of these running backs are a receiving running back. They want guys who can run the ball. They want to run the ball. They're going to be a run first offense, and they're not uh, going to be league worst since basically 2004, the Bush administration. Shout out to David Pla, who's been plugging that stat. League lowest in passing attempts since the Bush administration. So there's
yeah,
plenty of room to go up, but the baseline is so low that they have to go a long way just to get into league average. So I think the signal there for me is just don't go crazy about DJ
bang
Moore.
the rock. Yeah, I mean, look, maybe that kind of like Ravens type offense might be a model for them. Multiple running backs, high carry count, or even what Philly did last year. If the rushing offense is impressive. But yeah, it definitely seems like they're trending further in that direction rather than trying to be pass happy or really shift that way. Which, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty off more too. I have a bunch of shares. I could get good value for them. I think I'd be interested in selling them, but I don't I don't know. I feel like the sentiment, at least in the circles we run in, is pretty tepid
I
on
haven't found.
DJ
I've
Moore.
tried. I haven't made a single DJ Moore trade. I haven't been able to sell him for like any profit. Like I've sent some offers, all declined.
Would you sell him straight up for like a 107, 106?
That's exactly the cutting point. Like
Yeah.
107, I would take because you're getting Gibbs, JSN, or Quentin Johnson,
Yeah.
or just
Yeah.
like the upside, just sell for another vet plus and profit off that rookie hype. Like, so I think I would take that 108. Like now we're getting into all right. You got to pick Levis or Addison, and I like Addison, but he doesn't have the same sentiments from the community for the most part. You know, the draft capitals. It's going to be good. It's going to be first round, and he's an early declare. He was a productive player in college, but I just don't know if he's going to hold more value than DJ Moore.
Yeah.
So I think that's about where the cutoff is.
Makes sense. I have high expectations for Addison. I don't think he's going to be a wide receiver one, but I think he's going to be like a rock solid wide receiver two.
Kind of like Deontay. I've seen him.
Yeah, someone made that comp on Twitter today, and it makes a lot of sense. Polished route runner.
Who was it? Because we need to shout out because I saw that. That's where it's. I came across that too. That's why I'm just regurgitating it.
I'm sure I
shout out to whoever it was who made that because I think that's a good comp. I think that's
I also like it. Yeah, a lot of similarities. And you know, even I don't know if he's quite as agile as Johnson, but he's probably close. Like, there's definitely a lot of stuff on his tape where you see him grabbing the ball and like quick steps and dusting a couple of guys for some rack, despite not being, you know, a big physical receiver. So
I think he was a little bit faster than Deontay at his combine time.
He was,
He's got a little more speed, a little more of like downfield, I would say, capabilities.
Yeah. Deontay in college was a downfield guy. He wasn't this dink and dunk guy in college. Yeah. He was like
we're splitting hairs for sure. I think we agree. Definitely, it's a good comp.
It was Snoog.
Snoog, okay.
FF Snoog made the comp that we're talking about. So
give him a follow too. He's a good follow as well. If you guys aren't following,
he is lots of good content so far this year coming out of him. So all right, anything else? I was thinking.
Yeah, one more. Because I got one guy who I want to plug. I just feel has been getting no love. Who I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm stupid. But I kind of got like rosy eyes for this. Or at least I got a sweet spot in my heart for him. And that's Jacoby Brissett. And I think at this point, he has proven that he can be a capable NFL starter. He started 48 career games. He's got a 48 to 23 touchdown to interception ratio. That's more than 2-1. That's good. This past year, among qualifying quarterbacks, where Jacoby Brissett started 11 games, he was 16th in yards per attempt, 5th in completion percentage over expectation. He was plus 2.1%. He was 8th in QBR. So this guy was very, very good. Deserved to keep starting if it wasn't obviously the massive, $500 million, whatever.
A lot of money.
300, you know what? Deshaun Watson had to play. He had to go onto the field bottom line. That's what it was. It was not because Jacoby Brissett was not playing well. And now he gets an opportunity in Washington where Sam Howell is kind of a little bit of that Devy darling who we expected to get more draft capital, had a pretty good profile, and just didn't get any draft capital. Started one game as a rookie, but in an offense that was using Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke. Did decent in that game, but he certainly didn't light the world on fire. Threw like one touchdown, one pick. It was like, I don't know, 60% completion. Just decent. One game. I think Jacoby Brissett is got to be the odds-on favorite to be winning this job. And I see a little bit of similarity to Geno Smith. Like, nobody wanted Geno Smith last year. You could buy him for a late, maybe even a 4th-round rookie pick. And nobody really wants Jacoby Brissett this year. You could buy him for a late 3, maybe 4th-round rookie pick. He's played decently in the year before. We're talking about Geno. The year before last year, he was coming off, it was only 3 games, but he had a 5-1 touchdown interception ratio. And it was very, very good in those 3 games. So he's coming off a good year. Jacoby Brissett's coming off a good year. He's got an opportunity to start. He's got some decent rushing utilization. Brissett had 243 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 11 starts. That's not bad. And we talk about he's got weapons. He's got plenty of weapons in Washington. He's got Terry McLaurin, Dotson, got Curtis Samuel right now. Talk about if Logan Thomas is still there. They've got weapons. They talk about Antonio Gibson in the passing game. Plenty of weapons. So I really like the price point. I feel like nobody's talking about Brissett as a guy who you could start in Superflex leagues this year. When we talk about Superflex leagues, getting QBs can be tough. If you can get them cheap for mid to late 3, especially when we're talking about this rookie class that's going to generate some hype. There's some good prospects through the 3rd round. You might even wait till draft day, get him for like a later or maybe even a 4. Jacoby Brissett, I think he's going to start, I would say possibly the whole season. I think he beats out Sam Howell, has a good year. And then talk about the other winner. I think the other winner is Terry McLaurin if this comes to fruition. Because Amari Cooper was a wide receiver 1. He was a wide receiver 1 in those 11 games with Jacoby Brissett last year. He averaged 16.1 points per game. That would have been wide receiver 12 on the season. That would have been the highest point per game of Amari's entire career last year.
Dak never supported him like that.
Last year with Jacoby Brissett.
I never supported him like that.
Terry McLaurin, I know this has been just every year we do this and it doesn't work out. Terry McLaurin's got the best quarterback play of his career, and then he just finishes as mid wide receiver 2.
Yeah, he's like
this could be the year.
21.
He's still very cheap, McLaurin. You know, at this point, the age is priced in. It's all priced in. The expectations are not as wide receiver 1, but I think he's got the upside with Jacoby Brissett under center. I like him a lot in that range. Like, I think we have those 3 wide receivers, vets, Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, and Terry McLaurin, I think are very good price points where they could finish as wide receiver 1 redraft receivers. And they're going very, very, very cheap in Dynasty.
Yeah, that's fair. Every startup I've done this year, I've grabbed at least one of them. And last year I was trading for Ridley at the end of the season. And any team I had that wasn't really competitive, I wasn't going to win. I was making those moves to trade that guy that was clearly a declining asset for Ridley. We're like, yeah, Ridley could suck. He hasn't played in 2 years. It could be horrible. Or he could be like wide receiver 9. Neither one of those would surprise me. He's playing of T-Law, right? Like maybe the best quarterback play.
The upside is very high. I would say maybe he could be wide receiver. I would go higher, Eric. I'm not afraid to maybe be wide receiver 5. He's got top 5 upside. Like the last time he was a full season, he put up 1,300 yards. Like, and he's never had a quarterback with Trevor Lawrence's pedigree. It's just the best situation of his career. He's got all sorts of extra motivational factors to restore his name now. I think if he's healthy, he's motivated. Calvin Ridley's got it. There's almost no ceiling to what he can do in 2020.
Yeah, I'm with you on all those names. Ridley's been a big favorite of mine. And Brissett, so I've done a few startups already, and he goes 5 rounds after Howell, which I get it, shiny new toy. Maybe Howell is a thing and has but you take the arbitrage there.
I've got Brissett over Howell in my rankings.
Take them both.
The onus is on Sam Howell to win this job. At that point, when he does, I will move him ahead. I just don't expect it to happen.
Yeah. The other interesting guy for me that we didn't talk about was really Darren Waller. And kind of plays a little bit into our next segment here too. But he's a guy that's put up top 3 tight end seasons, has all the athleticism, certainly aging, but Bellinger got volume in that offense as a rookie, as a guy that was good in college, but not blowing minds. So I think there's a ton of opportunity for Waller to walk in there and really put up a top 4 or 5 tight end season this year.
Especially just the upside not being in Devontae Adams' shadow anymore. It just gives him that potential to be more of the featured option. And all else being equal, that's what we want. So it's absolutely, I would say, it's got to be viewed as a big plus.
I think they got to draft a guy too, though. They've been trying to get support for Jones. Waller's a step.
We talked about Addison. He could go there.
Everyone they have plays across the middle, right?
But they keep paying all of them. They keep giving them all. They just signed like they have.
Paris Campbell.
They re-signed Hodgins. They re-signed Slayton. I'm pretty sure they did something with Sterling Shepard. Paris Campbell.
Yeah, they brought him back. His contract expired. They gave him a new one.
That's 5. How many more can you fit into that wide receiver room where you're not going to have maybe these contracts? They figure, all right, if we got to cut Hodgins, whatever. I don't know.
I I bet the Paris contract is probably an easy out for them. You know
I
what I
feel
mean? It
like
was
they
a
might
couple
be
million.
happy to just go into this year with Darius Slane, Isaiah Hodgins, Wandale Robinson, Paris Campbell, and Darren Waller. I feel like they might
You
just
know,
be.
the depth kind of makes sense for them too, because look at it last year, right?
They have
Like
Saquon
Shepard
still.
goes down, right? Wandale goes down. Like they got decimated. So, I think it's kind of like San Francisco accumulating quarterbacks, right? Like you just like you think you just lost the Super Bowl because you didn't have enough QB depth. Like, yeah, you're gonna go sign
Just
Sammy Darnold.
lost third place in division because we didn't have enough wide receiver depth. The
Yeah,
heck?
you know. All right, all right. I think we could probably spend an hour on free agency if we wanted to, but that's not our primary purpose here today. So we're going to talk about scouting the 2023 tight end class and all that means, values, who we're targeting, why we like these guys, where we see them fitting in into the greater picture of the tight end landscape. But first, David, I want to ask you what is your process for evaluating the position? I know you're mostly coming from a data perspective. I think you do some film work as well. So, what do you care about? What's your process? School us, please.
Yeah, so just to give you a little bit of background history, I was pretty much forced into being the tight end guy. I was very vocal about wanting an elite tight end in fantasy. I had been playing redraft years for about 15 years, had dabbled with both. I had success with the late round guys like Vernon Davis. I had fun with that. And I had some other teams that didn't do so well with the late round guys. Then I started drafting some teams with, Travis Kelce was getting him in the fourth and the third. Even before that, Jimmy Graham. So I kind of started falling in love with these teams with the elite tight ends. I just found myself having more success. I found it being the hardest to replicate type of asset is an elite tight end. Found myself being able to find running backs off waivers, being able to trade for wide receivers, whatever it may be. But like an elite tight end is you got it or you don't. And I just became very vocal about that. And people started just assuming I was the tight end guy. So they started asking me all sorts of tight end related questions. And I'm like, I don't even have any sort of tight end process whatsoever. Like I wish I did. And then I just said, you know what? Maybe I should just start charting these guys, like just charting the profile. So I can at least have something to like guide my decision making process. So I basically just looked at everything that's being somewhat considered to be a predictive analytic. So we're just basically charting these guys, one, as college prospects, and then two, we're charting them through their NFL careers as well. So from pre NFL, we're charting just the basics, height, weight to start with, just to figure out kind of what they're shaped like. Are they bigger, smaller than the average tight end? Then are they outlier sized? So that's the number one thing. We want to look at some of the other analytical things. Are they an early declare? Because those are coming with a lot higher hit rate. I can pull those up at some point. I got to Google them, but I know that Sharp Football carries a lot of early declare metrics, basically, um, which highlights the hit rates for top 24 seasons, top 12 seasons, and basically across every position, you're going to see that the early declares are performing better. So we're charting that as well. We're going to be charting their draft capital, which we don't have for any of these guys yet, but we do have projected draft capital. We're obviously charting their college production. I use Dominator rating. Also, their college yards per reception, which is kind of a good idea of their efficiency. Um, then we're charting obviously the athleticism, all of the combine metrics, their 40, their vertical, the catch radius. So that gives us just a complete view, and then we're just color coding it so that way we can kind of see who's green, who's red, which guys have the red flags. And then once we get to the NFL, we're charting their points per game, their yards per route run. Eventually, I need to get to charting their target share, which is something I want to add to the checklist, but I've got a million other things to get to first, so that will come in time. But when you chart it all, you color code it, you stack all the tight ends next to each other, you start to kind of see which are kind of undervalued guys, which guys are overvalued relative to the others, and it just kind of gives you a little bit more than just like a raw age and points per game perspective, which is just the most basic way to kind of view things in Dynasty.
So I love it. So the short version, you care about prototypical size, right, and weight, care about athleticism, you care about dominator or production relative to their team's passing offense, right, and then yards per reception, which is kind of like a good marker for efficiency on a per attempt basis. Does that sum it up fairly well?
Yes, sir.
Cool. I was gonna say the other thing that I like too, and actually haven't done anything on this year, as I told you pre-show. I like yak in tight ends too, because that kind of helps you hunt down that like George Kittle type prospect. But and I do actually have PFF does have that for this class too.
Yeah.
So
I don't
will,
chart yak, but I'm definitely interested in those statistics as well. You talk about that. You talk about missed tackles forced. That's another thing I want to see, because that is definitely an element. We want guys who can be a threat after the catch, who can gain yardage in chunks. And I think that goes somewhat a little bit hand in hand with the yards per reception, because generally the guys who can have high yak are guys who average a little bit more yards per reception. But it's definitely good to do both and to look at both of those.
Yeah, I love it. And I did just pull some of those up as we were talking. So as we go through, I can maybe add some color with the yak and ADOT's kind of interesting for tight ends too. Are they just catching screens and dump offs, or are they playing a downfield role? So, all right, let's launch into the 2023 class with your tight end one, who is.
I don't know. Am I allowed to have a non-convicted stance?
Because 100%. It's early, man. We don't know anything. There's no.
And even once we know it, we know a lot. I have everything I need in my checklist here except for draft capital, so I know everything I need to know, at least from my process, about these players. And the draft capital I have projected, I have 3 tight ends. I have a 1A, a 1B, and a 1C. And the market's going to pretty much dictate what order I have them in. I could rank the guy I want at one, but he's not going to be priced there, so there's no reason for me to do so. So we'll start. I'll say the first 3 will be Michael Mayer, Dalton Kincaid, and I'm going to include Sam Laporta. And I believe all 3 of those guys are in the top tier. I believe they all have a claim to being the number 1 tight end in this class. Michael Mayer, obviously, talk about just from a pure dominator standpoint, he's got the highest dominator rating of any tight end in this class, 35.8%. That is green all the way through. That's the greenest green you can have in dominator rating. Above 20% is good. Above 30% is freaking great. And he did it all 3 years. He was an early declare. So that's another thing. Checking the box. He's going to be a first-round pick. So we put the athleticism aside. He's a very productive dude who is an early declare and is getting drafted round 1. Bottom line, that is a very, very good thing for tight end production. He does have only a 4.7 40, 32.5-inch vertical, and he was not superly explosive from a yards per reception standpoint in college. 12.1. It's nothing special. But he's going to get volume in the NFL, a very high floor. He's going to have a role. Talked about, I think you said Hawkins and Muth. He's almost identical in the way he compares to them. We talk about Hawkins and Muth. I think he's somewhere on that spectrum, perhaps at the top of it. All 3 of these guys are roughly 6'4", 250. All 3 of them are going to be drafted in the first 2 rounds. All 3 early declares. Muth didn't run the 40, but Hawk and Meyer both 4.7 40s. Dominator rating, we have 24s for Muth and Hawk. Meyer, obviously 35%. College yards per reception, Muth was 13, Meyer 12, Hawk 15.5. So Hawk was like the one who actually translated to a little bit more of an explosive role, even though he only had the exact same speed as Meyer. It translated a little bit better, but then again, it wasn't nearly as high a volume as role as Michael Meyer. So I think they're almost identical prospects. It's going to come up a lot. Is the question this year is going to be Meyer or Freiermuth? And I think that's going to be a debate a lot of people are going to have. But I think that's a good comparison for him.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of where how I felt about Meyer for a couple of years now. Is like Fryermuth was the mold of Hawkinson, not a hyper athlete, but just damn good at what he does, damn good blocker, hands of gold. And again in Fryermuth it's the same thing. And I think Meyer's that same guy. I think we're going to see him step in and just immediately play a role, be successful. I guess Hawkinson hadn't really had that top three type season before this year.
But he's also valued as a 4th-round starter pick now. So these people just saying Michael Meyer is never going to matter, I'm very skeptical of saying that, because if you're young enough and you're even like just above 12 points per game, he's going to be a 4th, 5th-round starter. But he's going to rise in value from where you're taking him. And even though it might not be the sexiest thing in the world, even though he might not ever be George Kittle, a guy who goes crazy, I'm not just removing Michael Mayer from my board because I'm not in love with his athleticism. Let's make that clear.
I think in rookie picks, in rookie drafts too, you don't just like Fryermuth, you're not going to have to pay for this guy. He's going to be there at like
he's going to be more expensive.
204.
Fryermuth was like a 210. It was a weaker class. I think you're going to have to pass
just
up.
Because of Pitts, though. If Pitts wasn't in that class.
Well, we talk about opportunity costs. The guys you're going to be passing up for Michael Mayer in this class, you were passing up like Michael Carter and Nico Collins for Pat Fryermuth. Like, it was just a different opportunity cost. But I don't hate Michael Mayer. I'm not removing him from my board because he's only ran 4.740. So, I'm fine with him.
I think he's going to be the most expensive of the three guys you talked about by far. You are one of the only people I've heard mention Laporta in that same breath. But, I mean, Laporta is the same, just been a dominant receiver from the tight end position for 2 years now in college. And then tested through the roof, too. I don't know why he's not getting more hype than he is. He's a prototypical NFL and honestly has better athleticism than Meyer. I think... And honestly, I pulled up yards per out run for the class, and it goes Michael Meyer, 2.44, Dalton Kincaid, 2.42, Sam Laporta, 2.16, like all right in a row. And they're also Laporta did the best of the three in YAC as well with 6.3 yards after contact per reception. That is nuts. That's nuts. I mean, obviously that's, playing college, but that is just wild. And Kincaid was right behind him, but maybe, I don't know, probably playing about the same level of competition as well, right? I mean, Kincaid was Pac-12, so it's a little bit weaker of a conference for defense, I think, than, Big 12 with Iowa, and all three of them, P5 guys, I think there's a lot to like. Kincaid, I think, a little bit of a later riser in this class, right? Didn't really do much until this past year. But what caught your eye of Kincaid? Just the normal metrics, or is it the athleticism for you that sells you on him?
Well, I think just number one, we have the projected draft capital and the dominator rating. He had a 34% dominator rating, which is extremely high. It's just 1% behind Meyer for tops in the class. And he's projected to go round 1. So we have a guy who was very productive in college, projected to go round 1. I don't have athletic measurements because he didn't compete in the combine. So I don't have nothing to hold him against him there. I would love to have something positive for him there, but I would much rather a did not participate than a participated negatively. So I'm not holding anything against him there for the lack of athletic drills. It would be nice to get something out of Pro Day. I'm not sure if he's participating at Pro Day in those drills or not, but it would be nice to get those. But he, just for the pure fact he's got round 1 draft capital and was just as productive from a dominator rating as Michael Mayer, I think he's got argument as well for tight end 1 in this class. So a lot of people are going to have him as tight end 1 in this class. And I think that's totally fair. Sam Laporta is a guy who's just, I don't think he's got any one trust other than the athleticism, which is huge. He's not an early declare like Mayer. His dominator was 25%, which is not 35%. But he led his team in receptions 3 straight years at Iowa as a tight end. He's got the highest athletic ceiling until Kincaid tests out of any of these 3 at 4.5, 940, 35.5-inch vertical, and 25% dominator is damn good. Let's make that clear. It's not 35%, but there's nothing to fret at about 25. He checks that box. That's green. So Sam Laporta, I think, especially at cost, he's got probably the highest ceiling at the lowest cost of those three. So when I look at the way the market's settling, I'm going to have the most of that guy. If I'm going to select Meyer or Kincaid, I'm just going to trade back and I'm going to pick up Sam Laporta plus. That's probably the way I'm going to go about it if I want to attack this class of rookie tight ends. There's some couple other guys, but it's those three first for me.
I think you got a good point too. It's just because there are three guys, assuming they all get draft capital, one of them's going to fall to 210, 212, 303, right, in every draft, because there's enough depth in this class at the other positions that, I mean, I'm mostly going to be trying to be hammering running backs in that late second round, just because there's so many good running backs that aren't elite, that aren't going to be in the first round. Like I definitely think others are going to have that same mindset and let these extremely nice tight end profiles slip till they're just basically free, which is awesome. If you need a little, you got Kelsey, you want to add something young at the position, I think this is a great year to really be considering that.
Yeah, this is a great class to have like a second and third round rookie picks and to need tight end. It's like a perfect class for you.
Yeah. All right. So after the top three, and I get where you're at, tough to rank them until you have a little more information, and they all have a great resume to me. So who do you have after that?
So I think the next tier is another three guys. And again, I feel like I'm going to be against consensus here as well, because the guy who charts the best in my process here is not the guy who's getting anywhere near as much hype as the other two, and he's the cheapest of the three. The next tier for me is Tucker Kraft, Darnell Washington, and Luke Musgrave. And we talk about, obviously, Darnell Washington and Luke Musgrave are the guys who are getting the hype right now at the combine. We have the 4.61 for Musgrave. He's projected first or second round pick. And we talk about Washington, who he was an early declare as well. We're in a 4.64 40 at 200 million pounds. So he's projected a first round pick in the NFL draft as well. So a lot of people are getting excited about Darnell Washington and Luke Musgrave. But I'm very, very, very skeptical of these two players, more so Washington than Musgrave, because they have dominator ratings below 10%, which is not just like a little red. That's like very red flaggish. Like, that's not good. We talk about the top 40 valued tight ends in the dynasty landscape now. And I'm going freaking deep, right? Going 40 deep. And we talk about how shallow the position is. For me to say, I'm going to go 40 deep on you. The only one in the top 40 with a dominator rating below 10% is Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox, who had a measly 4.2% dominator rating in college. That's it. Everybody else was at some point able to put up above 10% dominator rating. Darnell Washington and Luke Musgrave didn't do that. Luke Musgrave has an out because he got injured in his final season. And he was off to a good start in 2 games. And it looked very much like he was going to go above that 10% threshold. Probably was going to be around 20%, which would be good. And at that point, he would have basically everything else minus the earlier declare. He would have the draft capital. He'd have the athleticism, the dominator. He'd have it all. Darnell Washington, he don't have a freaking excuse, all right? He played with Brock Bowers, and everybody wants to use that excuse for him. But he also played with Ladd McConkey, Marcus St. Jack Smith, if I'm saying that, Jack St. something.
Yeah.
Rosemary Jackson.
Rosemy.
Yeah. Kenny McIntosh, a fifth-year running back, had more receptions than him. So we're talking about not just Brock Bowers, 2 other wide receivers, and a fifth-year running back had more receptions than him. He didn't finish higher than 5th on his team in receptions in any of his 3 years, Darnell Washington. He is just as much a 6th offensive lineman as he is a tight end, or dare you even get into envisioning him as a wide receiver. I mean, he is going to have a very successful NFL career, I believe. Talk about his spectrum. I think he's somewhere along O.J. Howard and Mercedes Lewis, with Howard being a little bit more of the receiver type and Lewis obviously being more that 6th offensive lineman type. Now, OJ Howard was not very productive in college either. He only had a 15% dominator rating, not as bad as 8.3% for Washington, but he's a little faster too in the 40. So I think Washington's probably would hope to be like OJ Howard if he was had a good outcome to his career, but he could just be Mercedes Lewis, who had, he's played 13 seasons in the NFL, very successful NFL career. He had one season where he caught 10 touchdowns. I could see Washington doing that, but Mercedes never went above 600 yards more than once, just one time in his career. And he's just a good NFL player, was never really someone you needed in fantasy. And I just see that for Darnell Washington. And he's just getting hyped up. Oh, he could be the tight end one in this class. I don't see that in any way, shape, or form. That's just a leap of faith beyond a leap of faith to take something like that and expect him to transform what he was into college into something completely, entirely different.
I'm with you. If I'm going to invest in these guys, I want to see someone who has done it in college, right? Someone who was able to be a producer in college. And I'd love to give them the out, like, oh, it was Alabama. They had this talented pass catching core, but which in many past years would be probably a valid narrative, right? But I'm with you. This year, they did not have much going on at that, at receiver, other than Bowers,
and for some reason, sorry to cut you off. Sorry to cut you off. For some reason, people bring up like Travis Kelce and George Kittle and say, well, they weren't, crazy good in college. Number one, Travis Kelce was suspended an entire season. Number two, both of these guys, Kittle and Kelce, they were above 20% dominator ratings. They were productive in college. So I think a lot of the people point to as like, oh, look, but this guy did it. They're just not even informed in whether they actually were productive in college. So I don't really see any comparisons for Washington.
Couple interesting tidbits on Musgrave. Musgrave's ADOT this past season, 12.4. Like that's a downfield roll for a tight end. And his yards per route run was an outstanding 3.38, eclipsing even Kincaid by a full
but how many
yard.
routes did he run? Like 60?
How many routes did he run? Right, yeah. I remember
not
those
even
early games.
He played 2 games.
Real big, busted some real big plays. So small sample size theater, we'll call it, but still, it's
at least he did it in a small sample.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you. So the name that I'm less familiar with there is Tucker Kraft. Let's talk about Kraft a little bit.
So Kraft is a small schooler. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Dallas Goedert a little bit. I believe he was South Dakota. I don't even know if they were from the same college. But another kind of small school Dakota boy. And he's got a lot of green in his profile. And he was arguably, I'd say, just as, impressive at the combine as these other two. Not quite as fast, 4.69 40, but he had a 34-inch vertical too, which is very good. So those are 2 green numbers there. He was by far the best dominator rating out of this group. He was at 21%. Washington at 8.3, Musgrave at 7.5. So I've got Kraft in the green, the other 2 in the red. And then projected draft capital, he's probably going to be a second or third round pick. Third, I would say at worst. There's a good amount of hype. It's a deep class, so he's not getting this first round talk. I think he could be like an early second round pick in like a weaker class. But I think he's going to be a second or third round pick. And I just think he's going to be a lot cheaper than Washington or Musgrave. I get it if you want to go shoot your shot on Musgrave. But if I was going to select Washington, I'll just trade back, get a plus, take Tucker Kraft instead, and just go that way as with a guy who I think doesn't have a crazy high athletic ceiling. But again, Dallas Goedert, similar to athletic. He didn't run the 40, so I don't know. But I don't think anyone's going to tell you Dallas Goedert is like this straight line speed guy. Like he's a good athlete, but he's not running a 4.50, So Tucker Kraft, he doesn't have elite straight line speed, but he seems to got just about everything else on paper for me. So I like him a lot, especially the price point. You can get this guy in the late 3rd, 4th round. I think we'll see if he gets the draft capital that bumps that up a little bit. But I love him as a sleeper in this class, Tucker Kraft.
So Do you factor in level of competition into your process at all? I mean, I know we have a lot of successful tight ends from FBS or FCS or G5 schools. So how does that play out with a guy like Kraft?
1,000,000% yes. We want to cross. That's the whole point of charting everything, is so we have those checks and balances in these cross references. And the way I describe it is the Dallas Goddard, Adam Troutman conundrum, right?
Hmm.
Because both Dallas Goddard and Adam Troutman went to small schools, and Adam Troutman as well. Adam Troutman had above a 30% dominating rating at a small school. Dallas Goddard was 30.7%. So both of these guys, small schools, above 30% dominating rating. How do we figure it out? Well, for one, athleticism. Dallas Goddard didn't participate, so I got nothing to hold against him. Adam Troutman didn't. He participated horribly. He ran basically like as slow as your average defensive end. So we had that. And then draft capital. That's going to tell us a lot about whether this player's small school production was legit. If the NFL tells us it was legit, it's probably more legit. If the NFL, like Adam Troutman, lets him fall to the compensatory section of the third, the fourth, I'm going to be a little bit more skeptical. All right, maybe this player's not as good as I thought. But if he gets drafted second round like Dallas Goddard, yeah, I'm gonna buy into that small school production because the NFL is telling me to buy into it. So I think it's
So
very important.
essentially, you're out after like pick 90. If he's after pick 90, you're done with him.
I want a tight end first, ideally the first three. Like the first 3 rounds, we want. You can make exceptions for guys in the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. You're really pushing it. Like you're really pushing it. And Kittle, we have Kittle. It's not a whole lot other than that. Talking about late, obviously Waller, but he had drug issues. Like those were
Well, he's
documented drug
drafted
issues.
as a wide receiver too.
Yeah, and you watch the Darren Waller story. They knew coming out he had drug issues. John Harbaugh speaks to it like, "Why is this guy not a first round? Oh, he's got these off the field, so we can't really say, oh, Darren Waller's drafted. Well, he was a known, had substance abuse issues. So,
Yeah. Wow.
but I want
Wow,
first 3 rounds. If I like a guy,
I
I
know. I
want
was
him
gonna say,
drafted first 3.
yeah. I had another thought along those lines, and it is completely wiped out of my mind now. So we're just gonna keep
Troutman, was
moving
there
it
something
on.
about Troutman? If we can go back and dunk on Troutman, we can do that. I mean, I'll dunk
Yeah,
on Troutman
Troutman.
all day long.
Oh, what I was gonna say is a guy like Kraft, like unless something really changes, like he's probably a fifth round rookie pick, right? I mean,
Fourth, I would say. He'll be a
if there's
fourth.
5 tight ends that come off the board before him, like
You're just not going to get enough highly drafted running backs like for him to fall out. Like he'll still be a early fourth. If he's a third round pick in the NFL draft, like I think he's going to be a fourth round pick because at that point you're taking like date.
how
Like
many rookie drafts have you ever seen where 5 tight ends were drafted in the first 4 rounds?
there's a lot.
Not
There's a
very
lot.
common. I mean, this past year you had guys like Otten who had good
This will
draft
only be
capital.
my 4th rookie class drafting. It'll be my 5th year
I've never
playing
seen
dynasty.
more tight ends drafted than I did this past year, and there wasn't like as many at the top. Like there wasn't like a Pitts or like even a Hawkinson in this past class, but there was a bunch of there was Bellinger, Otten, and 2 or 3 other guys in that range. But even those guys were like third and fourth round picks. Like you were getting Otten or Bellinger in like the mid fourth. I think that's kind of my expectation for where the second tier guys go. I think you're right. I think Washington is going to get massively overdrafted in some circles because people are just going to see the size, see the athleticism, see the helmet, and say, "Oh, he's going to be a star." Because NFL teams are going to love him, right?
I'm hearing people compare him to Gronk.
Well, he's a good blocker, is the thing. So, like, he gets NFL draft capital and he gets on the field, but like, is he going to be running routes? You
Yeah.
know, probably not. He's probably going to have a low route participation, right? Like, maybe really efficient when he gets the ball. But yeah, I don't see any team taking him as a volume receiver. I think he's going to be an inline guy. He's going to block on most plays, and then he's going to get those little leak outs, right? I chip, and then I leak out like 3 or 4 times a game, and I don't know, unless we're way off base, but I see it the way you do. Like if Saban didn't want to throw him the ball 7 or 8 times a game, probably doesn't need to be getting 7 or 8 targets in the NFL either, right? Particularly on an Alabama team that was underwhelming this year. So anything else to add on those guys, or do you have some sleepers that you want to throw us that are outside of your top 6?
Not too much more to add on those guys. The sleepers, I mean, I don't think there's probably 2 that stand out to me. And you could probably include another guy, but he seems a little bit more mid to me. But obviously the guy who stands out is Zach Kuntz, if I'm saying that properly. And
that's how I say it.
My God. I mean, there's going to be basically all this guy's going to be the green is green or the red is red when I'm doing these categories, because his 4.55 40-inch vertical, that's 99th percentile catch radius. He had a 23% dominator rating. I do believe that he had to transfer. Double check me on that, Kuntz, but I believe he was not productive for like 2 years, and then he put up that small school dominator rating. His yards per reception was terrible, 9.5 yards per reception. I don't know what kind of draft capital he's going to get. I'm going to assume not the top 3 rounds. So he's like a freak athlete who's got a good dominator rating, but is at a small school. I don't know if he's going to get drafted high. Like, crazy high ceiling, I think, if you put it all together, but I don't know if he actually has that kind of skill set, or he just runs in a straight line fast and can jump high. But by golly.
He was one of the focal points of that Old Dominion offense for sure. But yeah, he's playing at a lower level of competition for sure than some of these other guys are. I really think, like, with guys like him, that's where I'm like, we're not going to know anything until the NFL tells us what to think. But I'll say some of his data points don't look great to me either. 1.26 yards per route run. He's got a lower yak per attempt than some of the other guys there do. Had a great ADOT, actually 11.1. So that's a pretty down.
How do you get a 9.5 yard per reception on 11.1 ADOT?
That's true. You're not catching a lot of the targets is what's happening. But also, who was throwing him the ball? Like, the guy that was throwing him the ball is probably going to be a dentist next year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but yards per reception doesn't include incompletions. Like, he only averaged, when I'm charting, I mean.
Oh, yeah, you're just saying, right.
Yards per reception, not per route run, per reception.
I hear you. So, yeah, how do you get that ADOT? He must be getting a lot of deep targets, but not catching any of them, right? Only catching shorter targets near the line of scrimmage. That's how you get that set of data points.
Yeah.
I would think.
But he's an interesting one because it's like there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad. And typically that just means that they're bad. Yeah. But we'll see how it plays out. Another guy who I would say is interesting would be Will Mallory, who he's probably going to be, I would say, might be like the Bellinger of this class for me, where you might be able to get this guy undrafted. Like, you might be able to get him in the post-rookie draft waiver run. But he ran a 4.5, 4.40, 36.5-inch vertical. 15% dominator is nothing special. He's a role player. But that's about what Daniel Bellinger was, who was like a 4.6, 3.40. Let me pull up Bellinger's college dominator, but it was right exactly in that 16%. So 16, 15%. I would say similar type. You know, he might not do a whole lot as a rookie, but if he catches a couple passes, whatever, you know, you might be able to cash him in for early third or second. Like, you could probably cash in Bellinger for maybe the 212 if you added like a future 4, like before this Waller trade.
Before the Waller, yeah.
Yeah, before the Waller trade. But I could see him gaining a little bit of value in that way, where he's free, and then a year from now he's worth a high third, just based on catching a couple passes and having a 40 time that people can get excited about. So Will Mallory, if he's a guy who I can get free, if he's just adding him for like $1 bids for sure, post waiver run. His yards per reception was not great either, but he's a good athlete, role player. Is what he is. Then we kind of have another guy, Luke Schoonmaker. I don't know if you can tell me a whole lot about him. He's a decent athlete, 4.6, 3.40, 33.5-inch vertical. But again, kind of 15% dominator. He's basically Mallory with a little bit less zippity doodah to him, basically. Lower yards per reception by a little bit, 11.9, a little bit slower. What do you know about Luke Schoonmaker?
I mean, I watched him play at Michigan, but I'm not even sure he was the best tight end on that team. They had another kid, Eric All, that I was more impressed with. Schumacher had some decent games last year. It's how he got on my radar, scraping for tight ends on the college side, just like you do if you're missing them in redraft or whatever. I don't know. PFF has him as the 19th best rated for the offensive grades. So I don't think he's going to be a guy that we're going to have to worry about as a pass catcher in the NFL. Probably a guy that comes in and gets in a room, like maybe he's a tight end 4 on a team and gets some snaps. But he's probably more of a camp body than anything else. Yeah. For me, I did find an interesting data point on Mallory, who had some excellent yak. Let me find that again.
He reminds me a little. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
7.2 yards after contact per reception for Mallory. That is a lot.
That is pretty good. And I watched a little bit of Mallory tape just because I was just the YouTube highlights. Let's clarify that. I'm not trying to deep dive film. I'm by no means. But when I kind of see a guy who's got the athleticism, decent dominator rating, whatever, is going to be free in rookie draft, I just wanted to see what he looks like, what he moves like. And it seems like he's very long strider. Like he's going to be used on these long crossing routes across the field. But you talked about the yards after catch. If he catches it on these long crossers, he's got the speed and the length to just turn the shoulder, and all of a sudden he's 2 steps up the field. He's eight yards gained. So he's a lot of those plays you saw, at least on the highlights, where they're using him in these crossing. Just get his speed in motion. 4.54. You get that speed in motion with the long legs, catch it, turn upfield. And like you said, he can be a guy. He's not going to make you miss. He's not going to gain yak in that way. I didn't see him really powering through any tackles. That's not what he's going to do. But he's got the kind of speed and vertical roll where, you catch the ball and you're already moving pretty fast and covering a good amount of ground.
Yeah, that makes sense. Michigan did a lot of that stuff with wheel routes, deep crossers, just a lot of seam routes.
Florida, right? Was he Florida, Will Mallory?
Oh, Mallory was Miami.
Miami. Yeah, Miami.
Yeah, Mallory. And again, I remember Mallory because I wanted him to be. That's where Pitts went, right? Miami.
No, Florida. We both swapped the two.
There was another tight end ahead of Mallory at Miami, and I thought once he cleared out, it was Brevin Jordan. When I thought Brevin Jordan cleared out, Mallory was going to have this high volume role, and it just never materialized for him. So I'm kind of tepid on both players for an NFL future. But like you said, the free, that's the guys you leave alone, and then maybe in spring camp, if you're hearing that they're competing for a role, they're going to make a roster, you make that $0 bid and throw them on the taxi if you've got enough space. And the only other guy that I think is even relevant at all about this, and I feel the same way I feel about those two, is Payne Durham from Purdue. I don't know if he tested at the combine or anything, but he was a high volume player for them. He used 550 receiving yards and a 10.2 yards per reception this year for them. So he's relevant. Again, I don't know. Like these are the kind of players that are like, he's relevant. He might make a roster, not like he's going to be a tight end that we have to worry about for fantasy football unless something, changes. But also some nice, yak there.
So I have beyond the top 6, I have charted basically it's been all the combine participants. I have Kuntz, Mallory, Schoonmaker, Brenton Strange, Josh Weil, Blake Whiteheart, Davis Allen, Payne Durham, and then I also charted Jaleel Billingsley because he put up a good 40 time in his pro day. But out of that whole lower range, the only guys above 20% dominator ratings were Kuntz and Payne Durham, who was 24.3%. The problem I have with Payne Durham is he did participate at the combine. He ran a 4.87, which is like I was crapping on Adam Troutman. Adam Troutman makes Payne Durham look like a tortoise. I mean, 4.87. I could almost run a 4.87. I mean, geez. But he did have a good dominator rating. The yards per reception 10. He's an inefficient player. if he had a 24% dominator rating, he's probably decent at the role he does. So kind of like you see like a Dalton Schultz, Jake Ferguson, even who is probably the guy stepping into Schultz's vacated
I'm high on
position.
Ferguson this year for sure.
And Ferguson did not wow me at all with his combine numbers. He was sub 4.8 as well. Let's see what he was at. 4.81. But Ferguson, 28% dominator rating in college, 10 yards per second. It's almost like Payne Durham again. But Ferguson was a 4th round pick. We'll see what round Durham gets drafted. If he gets drafted in the 4th, it's almost identical kind of profile to Jake Ferguson. Which again is not going to really mean anything unless he lands in a high-powered offense with another tight end who's headed to free agency the next year. So yeah, if that happens, sure, I'll add some shares. But if he's just like goes somewhere not a good offense, I probably don't really care about him.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting this year to see because there's all the guys, the young guys that came in last year that got starting positions or backups that evolved into starting positions. There's even some of the guys from the year before. Who's the kid that went to the Colts? That's like the hyper athlete.
Jelani.
Jelani Woods. There's a few other guys in that class. It'll be interesting to see if any of these guys can stick. Like now, those guys that are in their 3rd year or their 2nd year, like you really want to see them owning that role and commanding it. And if they don't, then I think you might see some turnover in that too. So I got a million Woods shares floating around that I'm hoping he can become a thing with that athleticism and certainly his flash when he gets the targets. But just damn, man, like they get this 3-way timeshare thing that they insist on doing. That's just brutal for fantasy.
I like Jelani Woods. He charts well in my system. The draft capital is not great. He had a very high dominator rating. It did come in his final season, I think, once he transferred, which is not great. We obviously want early production in college and not when they're in their final season. But he was 34% dominator rating, so he did it. Like it was last year, but he did it. 4.6, 140, 37.5-inch vertical on a yards per route run, 1.51. That's good. He was doing well with his opportunities. You mentioned the rotation, the snap and the route participation was the biggest issue. If we saw Jelani Woods with full route participation, 1.51 yards per route run, like rookie season, oh boy, you could get excited about that. So I very much agree. I think he's cheap right now. I don't think now's a great time to sell. I think if he starts off with a couple good games, he's all of a sudden automatically worth a future second.
So, David, I got one more really important question. So, what are you going to pay me to trade up to the 101 from the 102 in the Dynasty Wars League?
From the 102?
You got the 102. I got the 101.
I don't think I'm in position to add a Bijan in that league.
You have 2 good quarterbacks.
But I have no.
You got like Watson and someone else. I got nothing.
No, the problem. I think I have Lance in that league as my second QB.
That's
the problem is my wide receivers was just like disappointment city. Like I have Bateman, Elijah Moore. Like I just had all these wide receivers. I would like to sell out of that pick, and trade down, add JSN and some extras. Like ideally, I don't think that team. I'm ready to move up to 101. 101 is like, if you're moving up to 101 and you're ready to pay that price, you better have wide receivers, I feel like, and I just don't. So it's just not really something I'm looking
or at least some capital to add some like older wide receivers.
Yeah, right? Like I'm bare as bones outside of, and I think I have Pitts. I have Pitts and some QBs, and then like Kamara and Pollard, I think, and then some disappointing wide receivers. So
yeah, we both managed to not ace that startup pretty badly. I walked out of it being like, I'm going to compete, and then immediate was like, yeah.
I think I had a decent first year, but then I traded Kelsey and some extras for Pitts, and that really burned me. And then obviously I traded AJ Brown for Bateman plus, that killed me. Terry McLaurin for Elijah Moore plus, that killed me. Like I like all
these guys too. So
That
Really,
league,
yeah.
like a lot of it coalesced. Like overall, I had a pretty good year, but like there was a couple like guys in that range where I was targeting. If you ended up with 3 of them in the same league, they were carrying enough value where it was enough to just really do some damage. Yeah, I had Trey Lance. Like I said, I had Trey Lance, Rashad Bateman,
Yeah.
Elijah Moore. See ya. It's not a good year for that team.
What are you doing with Lance right now? Buy, sell, or hold? I'm literally
I would like
staring
to
down the
trade up.
barrel of like I'm in the 3rd round of a startup right now. Tua just went off the board. Stroud, Young, and Richardson are gone. So it's either like wait for like Wilson or Cousins, right? Or like pull the trigger on Lance in like the middle of the 3rd round. But I'm like, God, man, like Purdy played good. Like I still think Lance is by far the more talented guy. They're invested in him. If he doesn't look good after like 4 weeks, like he's not going to have a lot of run.
I'm fine with the startup price tag. I would like to trade up into some of these undervalued quarterbacks, like if you consider someone panicking on Lamar or Kyler or Deshaun Watson. It's been tough for me to actually get those deals done. I feel like
Yeah, they all went in the top 10 in this one.
people just, I feel like they want me to add like an arm and a leg to Trey Lance to go get to one of them. And I see other people get these deals done. And I'm like, I would do that, but nobody's doing that for me. So I'm just kind of like holding them. Like, all right, let's see if I can acquire Brock Purdy for stupid cheap, like a late
That's what
3rd
I'm
or
doing.
4th. Like
Yeah.
that. And just, I'm not terribly worried about, I was worried about Purdy. But the way it just went down in the end with, a serious injury in a blowout game where, his last play was just leaving a poor team. They really have to give Trey Lance a shot. Like, and Brock Purdy's not going to have any opportunity to force their hand. He's going to be injured recovering. He's not going to be ready until just before the season starts.
3 months return to throwing. So he misses camp. No, he misses OTAs, but he should be there for camp.
You talk about
Right?
Lance if he plays bad. They're going to give him at least 4, 5, 6 games. I mean, they're not going to pull the plug that quick. And how do you look bad with that play caller and those weapons? He was decent enough in college. Like, and if he isn't bad, man, he's going to score so many freaking points. So I'm not.
Yeah.
I was panicky when Brock Purdy was healthy and it looked like he was seizing probably that starting 2023. But the way it unraveled at the end.
The way it'll go wrong is if Trey doesn't look good in camp, right? If like we don't hear anything from camp that's positive, then it's time to panic, right? Because that like Purdy has been successful, right? So if Lance isn't at least putting up the points that Purdy was last year for the offense, he's going to have a short leash.
I do agree. The onus is on him to perform. Like they're not going to just play him forever with a capable backup if he's not getting the job done.
Yeah, I'm either going to probably take Kelsey right now. I'm like 307, or I'm going to take Lance. And then if I take Kelsey, I'm just kind of.
What wide receivers are still available?
There's a lot of good ones. I mean, the top. I think Tyreek's still out there, but I'd rather have Kelsey than Tyreek.
Yeah,
and I
feel
like they're similarly locking me into a win now role right now.
One at a much more crucial position.
Yeah, and this is like a little bit of. There's like some really seasoned people in there, and there's some other people just from the chatter that like I feel like aren't that experienced. So I'm worried about like a vicious quarterback run when the panic hits in, which is fine. Can probably wait it out, take Rodgers in like the 7th or something, and be good, and like win this year, getting the money. But
Daniel Jones may be around later in the 4th. I don't mind him in the 4th round.
He won the last one, the mid 4th. So if I take Kelsey here, I think I come back and take Daniel Jones because at least he has a job for a couple of years, unless he really
good rushing upside. He's got a high floor with that rushing upside. He's got good coaching staff. They're adding weapons. Like they brought back Saquon. In the 4th round, like if you're not spending up for one of those early quarterbacks in the first 2 rounds, like there's not a ton of great options. I like Jones. Like I love Geno in the range. I think Goff's decent. Russ, you're putting
like a 6th round pick still, man. He's cheap. I have so many shares from last year, though.
I sold all of them stupidly. Like I was like, free money. I got them for free. Listen, now I'm like, I want to buy them back like way more than I sold them for. I was like,
you gotta start watching the show, David. We did a deep dive on him in the middle of the season because I was having that same internal crisis, and me and Jeff Abercrombie, the Sofa Scout, went down and I broke out all the data and we broke down film of him. We're both like, dude, he's good. Like he's playing well, and then he had just a cold streak towards the end of the season, which made me a little bit nervous.
I got a bunch of free twos, so I'm not terribly disappointed. Like turning a waiver, I spent a couple waiver bucks and sold them for twos. Like it's not
waiver money's free money. So
I kept one though, and it was in a league where I had Russell Wilson. I'm like, I feel like I gotta keep Geno in this league. Like it's not going well. I'm just gonna keep him just in case. And now I'm like, I'm not trading fucking Geno.
Yeah.
I got Burrow, Geno, Russ, and I'm definitely keeping Geno.
Yeah, you got to, right? What if Russ pulls a disappearing act again? I don't think he does. I think Russ is back to a top 12 quarterback this year. I think that's the popular opinion. I don't see why he wouldn't be. He played well at the end of last year after they ousted Hackett, so I think he'll be fine this year. But are you buying Russ?
I like him at the price point. I struggle with the Russ versus Geno, like because I have to take Russ ahead of Geno, like if I'm taking.
Oh yeah,
and Geno was he was QB 8 in points per game. Like he's younger. He also got a contract. Why am I taking Russ above? I did it to diversify in like my last start because I have more Geno than Russ because I had done like 3 starts this year and gotten Geno in every single one. So I'm like, all right, I'll take it. And I didn't feel good about it. I'm like, fuck, like I want Geno instead. Like
I had no Burrow shares and I had the 106 in this. And for some reason, they all let Hurts fall to me. And I have like 10 copies of Jalen Hurts. And I was like, this is a foolish thing to do, but I'm going to take a copy of Burrow just because I just don't have any, you know what I mean? And I have so much Hurts. So then afterwards, I was looking at the PPG difference of them last year. And I was like, oh man, I'm dumb. It was like 3 points per game, It wasn't like 1 or 2. It was like, shit, that's
I try to diversify organically. You don't want to force diversification, like because your roster is going to diversify itself, and you should be diversifying through finding value, to trading this guy for that guy plus, like not just trading this guy for that guy just for diversification. But
I do have a back-to-back in the rankings, but
when it comes down to that, sometimes you got it. Sometimes, like you said, like you got to trust your gut. Like I have a million.
And the thing about Hurts
million shares.
Well, I know what my gut thinks right after I make a move. I'm either like sinking feeling and I'm like, oh, it's dumb. It's going to cost me money. Or I'm like, oh, I feel okay.
But it goes both ways. Like I've had those, like where there's guys and I don't want to pick this, but I'll pick it just in it. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I came around on him late. I was picking other guys in that range. And then I was like, I'm kind of coming around on this guy, fuck it. Take it out. And it worked out great in that league. So it's like, sometimes when you have a million shares and there's another similarly priced guy who you have 0 shares of, it's not a terrible thing to just say, I'm gonna switch it up.
My thought too is that if like Hurts gets hurt, it takes down like 5 of my teams already, so it does help me de-risk a little bit, which when you have a lot of teams, I think that like portfolio management and de-risking is a wise thing to do.
That's
like,
the
I
one.
I don't want to have 10 copies of CJ Stroud.
I wish people talked to me about that more when I started playing Dynasty and explained how important it is to diversify your rosters and not to just overload. Like you got to have thresholds. Like it's fine to be high on players and to have above market shares of players, but not just from a risk tolerance, what happens if this player gets injured, like you said, but just from a weekly variance point. So like the money-making weeks, it comes down to 1 week. Like if you have similar players in that range and you put all 12 of your 15 eggs in this one dude's basket, he's got a bad just week 17, great season, bad week 17. Now you're just, and you could obviously argue the opposite. But now you got 12, 15, a guy who does great. But I think generally speaking, you especially high priced players, you in quarterbacks especially too, like you want to diversify because any one of them could have that big week just in the final week. So you don't want to just have the same guy playing in all of your lineups across your leagues.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, even like this year, I was in a ton of playoffs. Like I think at least the same playoff or similar to the same playoff rates last year. Last year, I like tripled my money in Dynasty. I just ran so pure; it will never happen again. And I won so many third place finishes this year, which is just like it's fine, but it's kind of like it's kind of sad too. Like,
congrats on your 110 and $20.
yeah, exactly. Like I made like $100 last year, and if half of those were first place finishes instead, which is probably a 2-point difference, I would have made like $1,000. So it's what it is. All right, I don't want to hold you hostage, David. This has been awesome. I appreciate you coming on and just dropping knowledge bombs about the position and about free agency. I think we got a lot of good work done here tonight. So can't thank you enough. You want to make one final pitch to the people if anyone hung around for an hour and a half to listen to us talk? Where should the eyeballs go?
Why wouldn't they? How could you start this show and not tune all the way through? But yeah, just follow me on Twitter. That's where you're gonna get all the good stuff, all the free stuff. I shouldn't say all the good stuff, all the free stuff. But yeah, if you want the really good stuff, you can go to Patreon. That's gonna be all the special stuff, my rankings. I got top 250. Every player's got a buy, sell, hold tag, player note, recommended trades as well. You're gonna get the tight end anatomical checklist, which we talked about. You're gonna get every tight end who I have charted basically in the top 50 dynasty tight ends, organized by my rankings, their entire profile, color coded so you can see which guys stand out, which guys are red flags. And then also you can get into the Guru Fantasy World Discord, which is great as well. We have some other awesome analysts in there. Shout out Akash and Nelly. Akash, I gotta get better into pronouncing his name. I butcher it every single time. Akash and Nelly, shout out. I'm sorry, Akash.
Yeah, those guys are both ballers too.
Yeah, so they're available as well if you want to pick their minds in the Guru Fantasy
So
World Discord.
You heard it, folks. Give David a follow. Hop in the Patreon. Hop in the Discord. He's got an all-star crew going on in there. Tons of resources for you. And again, if you don't already subscribe to the show, please please subscribe. One final plug: if you're watching film this year, I'll drop my promo code and a link. Get 15% off any Dynasty Nerd subscription. It's their Dynasty GM tool, but particularly the film room, which is part of the Nerd Herd sub. No better way to watch film than having us cut it up for you and serve it up in 5-second segments. It saves hours and hours. And, don't take our word for it. Watch some film yourself as well. So I got to thank everyone for watching. It's been an awesome show. Thanks again, Dave. And we will catch you all on the next one.